second. Has it started recording? Yes. So once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining for another session of Azure Power Lunch. Just a disclaimer, this session will be recorded and we are going to be putting those recordings on our YouTube channel. So if you're not comfortable with it, you may want to drop now. And for the audience, the topic today is Azure Static Web App. These are currently in preview. It was announced at the build a couple of weeks ago. I mean, time just flies and we already passed build. So we're going to talk about that. First of all, quick blurb about myself. And I will put the recordings in our YouTube channel in the link of the slide deck will be in our YouTube channel description. So you can, and also if you want to know about what our upcoming session, what's happening, you can go to our website as well, azurepowerlunch.com. I mean, that's where upcoming session schedule is announced and things like that. So if you want to provide feedback, just email back to us. Okay, so Azure Static Web Apps. This is something that is just put in preview. So just to give you a quick background, you may or may not be know that you can host static websites in Azure Storage. So Azure Storage provides a feature where you can bring your static website. And when I say static websites, these are sites which are developed in Node.js or frameworks like React, Angular. I can't pronounce that name, SVELTE. I don't know how to correctly pronounce it, or Gatsby. So these are popular frameworks that you can use to build those sites. These are sites which runs in the client browser. There is no server interaction. The only server interaction is when they call API. So basically they get data from some backend API if needed, and then merge it and then basically run it in the client browser. They're becoming really popular. So Azure started that with static ability to host those sites in Azure Storage. But the customer demanded more. They wanted a custom domain name, authentication, all the, kind of all the requirement, which if you want to run an enterprise static website, you will need. So that's where Azure Static Web Apps comes into picture. Okay. What they do is they build on top of that foundation and they provide you the ability to really host enterprise scale web application. I mean, if you are doing it with storage, you have to do a lot of stuff by yourself. You can do all those things there, but then you will have to bring other pieces into picture like CDN and probably traffic manager. This static web apps provide everything in a single package. So you can build your website in minutes and basically host it using static website. Okay. So as I said, these are the frameworks which are supported. It supports authentication and authorization, and we will take a look at that as well. And you will see how easy it is to do authentication and authorization. And just keep in mind, this is in public preview. So this is out there for you to take a look. Currently, it's free, so you can try it out and provide feedback. And of course, if you have functions, it basically you don't have to do a separate function app. You can have functions there as well, and it will create a function app behind the scene and host your functions over there. So that's definitely it has the ability to do that if you want to. Okay, and finally, it is all CI/CD is powered by GitHub Actions, so you don't have to worry about kind of using it in some what we call Azure DevOps or anything. I mean, it all done through GitHub Actions. So that's an integration that is right there built in. So just a quick overview how this thing works before we go into the portal and look at a demo. Let me just hide the notes so I have more space. Basically, what you have is you have your repo in GitHub, and from there, as you make code changes or as you want to deploy it, it goes through Azure Actions, deployed the web app into in a static web apps behind the scene. If there are any APIs, they're created in Azure Functions. And just keep in mind, those functions are a part of the Azure web app, static web app. So you don't have to create a separate function if you don't want to. So that will be there. And then you will have your end-to-end web app created for you to take a look. Just quickly recapping. Once again, your repo is in GitHub. It's directly integrated from there. You don't have to deploy from your on-prem. It's all built in through GitHub Actions and all. If you're using any APIs, they're powered through Azure Functions, and once again provide authorization and authentication. Any questions?
Naveed, this also integrates with Azure DevOps, I assume. It's not just GitHub Actions.
Okay, so in public preview, that's a good question. Only DevOps. So sorry, only GitHub.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, I think I need more coffee this morning. So only GitHub. Just keep in mind, this is just a public preview. So let's see how it evolves as people provide feedback. So what they have done is they started with the foundation, GitHub, and GitHub Actions and the application. So
thank you.
Okay. So, and let's start with the Azure Portal. So hopefully everybody can see the Azure Portal. So let's see the creation experience. What we are going to do is we are going to pick a resource group, and then I'm going to pick a name. And let's use Best 2. By the way, right now, the only SKU that is available is free. Maybe they will have some other like a standard or premium SKU in the future, but that's the only SKU that is available in public preview. Okay, so this is my GitHub repo, and let's pick a repo that I have. I think I had the one that I wanted to use, Static Web App React. I'm going to use the master branch, and that's all you need. So first of all, you sign in with your GitHub account. That's very important. You have to have a GitHub account. I mean, if you want to play with the preview, you have to have a GitHub account. Once you sign it, you pick your repo that you want to tie into it, and then from that point on, you go. So let's do a build, and this is an interesting screen. This is going to be your application. So let's say if you are, you have a directory structure which have other stuff there as well. Just provide where your application is, okay, and where your API location is. So you don't have to follow this pattern. Your API may be located at server or server calls or some different name. You just need to provide it. Same thing. If you don't have a different location for build, you can put it there as well. Especially with where you have multiple repos or multiple things, then you can put that or multiple things that you're doing in that repo, then you can maybe have a different build directory. The rest of the stuff is pretty boilerplate. You have tags and all, so we can just do a review create. And at that point, Okay, so this is already linked to this repo. I should have picked a different repo. So what we can do is let's um, so you understand. I mean, this is the experience. Once that is created, what will happen is what have happened is it links it and it will basically create the web app and it will start the build process. So I already have a web app that is linked to that particular um, uh, repo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a check-in from on-prem. So let's go in here. This is once again, I have cloned that repo on-prem, and I'm going to make a check-in just to show how this thing works. So I'm going to say Azure Power Lunch, and let's put the date today, 06/05-2020, and we're going to save it. And with that, we're going to say updates. So it's going to push that change in. Okay, so right now it is checking this change into GitHub. And what we're going to do is let's go into that GitHub repo and take a look at it. So this is the GitHub repo where I'm checking in my code. And let's look at the actions. So this is just the action that we did. As you can see, the time. This is like 11 seconds ago. And if I look at it, so if you're not familiar with GitHub Actions, um, probably we are going to do another session and GitHub action. Um, I see Prithvi was on that call, so probably he can help, deliver that. So GitHub Actions is kind of a DevOps mechanism built in, a CI/CD mechanism built into GitHub. As soon as you make a code change, it will, do the build and deploy job. So this is the build job running. It's kind of doing the installation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our web apps. This is the web app that is linked to that particular repo. So as you can see here, if I look at go to configuration, uh, so this is the API configuration. Give me 1 second. Yes, it will show you which GitHub repo is linked to. Source master, so it will tell you like which GitHub repo it is linked to. So if I click on that, it will take me to my GitHub repo where I am linked, and this is basically the workflow file. And by the way, I can change it if I want to. In any case, let's browse that web app. So it hasn't been updated yet. You see, it just got updated. As you can see, this is the text that we put in 06/2/2020. Okay, so the point is simple static web apps, very little um, 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 very little stuff that you are, I mean, you have to do to kind of do all the DevOps. You just push the changes into your GitHub, and from there, it will be, deployed to your web application. Okay, so that's the simple stuff. Let's say that we talk about some of the more challenging stuff, like how the authentication and authorization works. So what it has is it has the support for authentication and authorization, and it supports a number of providers. For example, of course, Azure AD. Um, it supports Facebook, Google, and the usual suspects that we have. Okay, so that's that support is there, and the way it is supported, um, what it allows you to do is you can go into role management, and that's where you can invite um, based on the identity provider. So you have Facebook, you have Google, you have Twitter, you have GitHub, and these are for the preview. You give the email address, you give the domain name, and what role they are in, and how you link roles to kind of authentication and authorization, that is done through routes. So, the static web apps have routes, like how you kind of set up routes. So uh, if a user want to go to a certain URL, how you redirect them to a certain default route. So all those things. So that's how it supports kind of use the same mechanism to support authentication and authorization. So for example, I have a little more, I won't call advanced, a little more, an app has a little more functionality. And by the way, that is available as a sample as well. So I'm just using that app. So let me just browse to that app as well first. Okay, so I'm gonna go in here. So this is my app, Shop at Home, and as you can see, these are all the authentications, all of that, and these are different, URL that I can, paths that I can go into. Okay, so let me just open it in a anonymous browser. Okay, just to show you the authentication. So if I try to go to my list, it will take me there. Oh yeah, so basically it is giving me 401 error. The reason is I am not authenticated. So I need to be authenticated to access, the discounts or my list and all that. Okay, so how I set up that authentication. First of all, what you will have to do is you will have to set up routes. So this is the code for my shop at home. And I have set up different routes. For example, for discounts, I have set up routes preferred. So if I want to go and kind of look at the discounts, I will have to be in the preferred role. Okay, so just keep in mind, this is the path that has to be there. And if I want to access the APIs, I have to be authenticated. So if I want to call any API for my list or anything, I have to be authenticated. So these are the two roles I have to be in. By the way, authenticated is a default role. Whenever I sign into a provider, I am authenticated. But preferred is a custom role. I can have another role like foo or you know or administrators or anything that is, and I can set those allowed roles and routes and do all that magic. So only those roles can access it. And how I set it up, that is done through here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here in the role management, and that's where I'm gonna set those roles up. So I'm gonna click here. I'm gonna use an Azure Active Directory role. So I'm just gonna use Azure admin add. So that's an Azure Active Directory that I have, and this is the role name. This is my app. I'm gonna set it to what was the role? I forgot. Preferred. So let me just copy this, and I'm gonna set the preferred role here. Invitation expired. So that's the invitation, and I can send the link in an email or text or whatever, and they will have access to it. So with that, I'm gonna go in here and paste this link here. So what it's gonna ask me to do is it's gonna ask me to sign in. So I'm gonna say, so I'm gonna sign in. Okay, let me sign in with the password. It's gonna send me um, to the sign in page. So let's do that. Yes, I give the grant the consent. So now I am signed in. Look at that. It's saying, welcome. This is my email address. So it knows. And this is the authentication provider, which is Azure Active Directory. And now I can access any of these. It says loading data. So it's going to load all my data. It's going to load all my discounts. Okay. So that's one thing. Let's come in here and let's look at, let's close this and let's refresh. So now we have one user here. Okay. So I think definitely, I mean, you may want to ask the questions like how we will handle it if there are kind of groups of users, user row. I mean, a bulk user you want to add to this site. So definitely, just this is a preview. Take a look, get a feel of for it, and those things. I'm sure at some point will come along. So this is how you can do the authentication and authorization. And look at that functions. Um, Let me just refresh. So these are all the functions that are there. And if we look into our application, this is the APIs. These are the APIs that are here. And these APIs are basically, this is the list of APIs that are there, and this is in the API folder. So what it is doing is it is loading that information from the from that API location and creating a Azure function behind the scene to have all these APIs available. I don't have to do a separate Azure function. If I want to do a separate Azure function, definitely I can do it. But in this scenario, I'm not doing a separate Azure function. It's a part of the whole package is doing Azure function for me behind the scene. One of the big demand is always custom domain. And you can, if you have custom domain, you can set up, custom domain and, all of that here. So that's facilities there as well. Um, and the blue-green deployment. So let's say that you don't want to just always deploy to production. Normally, you have a staging website, you deploy it there, test it out, and then you do it in production. So that support is also there. What I can do is I can deploy into staging and as a result of any pull request, and then switch staging with production. So that's I can definitely do. So these are and they are automatically created, whenever there is a pull request. So that's kind of a big plus. You have support for configuration. There are ways to read configuration settings if you create. So a lot of stuff that is that is there for if you have used Azure Web Apps, web app platform that is there has been made available here as well. So if you are familiar with that platform, you can use the same semantics. At the same time, it's made kind of a very much simplified. So if you have static web apps that don't need all those server semantics, you don't have to worry about it. So that's kind of makes this definitely easier to use and kind of quick to start with. Okay, any questions?
Hey, yeah, this is Corey. Can you have a SSL on those custom domains with that configuration?
As far as I know, yes.
This is JP. My question is, from a customer's perspective, right? Let's say they have to choose between the web app and this, right? Because it's going to come up. What would be the recommendation? Hey, if you can customize it so that you don't need that powerful backend that we provide in web apps, do so, or continue on the same path for web apps.
I mean, if you're asking me today, I will ask them to continue with the web app. And here's why. This is preview, public preview. I mean, we don't, if they're using any functions within that, we don't know how they are being scaled. So this is strictly at this point is in an, public preview is like eval mode. Play with it, get a feel of it. So that's why I would say, stick with web apps. But in the future, if it provides like some sort of SLA and things like that, then definitely.
Yeah, and that's what I was for. Not necessarily in preview. In preview, nothing should be in production.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, then it's a very compelling case. I mean, if it provides, and if we're in a hypothetical, so let's say they provide some SLA and things like that, then we can definitely take a look. Hey, you have these two things. There's a lot of stuff there in web apps that you are not using because you are using static web apps. I mean, static, web application like Angular or React. So why don't take advantage of this? Because this things makes really simple. And to be honest, one thing that I kind of really like is simplicity with the role management. I know it is kind of very manual right now, but as it evolves, hopefully they make it more automated. So where you can add roles and groups of users, but in any or bulk users, but that's make kind of very clear. Okay, I have this user, I give them this ability to access this path and or part of my application, things like that. So that's a big plus point, even given that you are not using any server-side application, you're just using a static web app.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Corey again. So what if in your function or your web, not your web app, but in your calls, you're calling like a data source?
So basically if it's a static web app, remember it's running on the customer browser. So if you want to get to a data source, you have to go through an API.
Right.
So there is no server. I mean, when I'm running this web app, it's running in my browser. This facade that you see is just managing how it is built and how it is kind of deployed, because whenever I access that URL, it's going to be downloaded into my browser and it's going to run there. So it's running on. So anytime you want to access a data source, let's say SQL database or Oracle or whatever that it may be, you have to have an API on top of it. So that's kind of so we are right on time. Any other questions?
Is there any cost advantage to this? This is Solar.
Right now it's free, so it's.
No, I'm talking. I mean, JP asked the question. I think all of this is for when it becomes GA.
Yeah, you're spot on. But at that time we will realize. So let's say if at GA you see that functions, it has functions and the price is kind of less than if I have to do an Azure web app and Azure functions, then probably once we have kind of more information available, I think that would be a question I mean, we should be able to address, but at this point, it's very hypothetical, I would say.
Yeah. I had a comment. Like, it seems to me that this is like a precursor to our own, what is it, a SFTP service based off of storage. I mean, it seems like it's not a far stretch from this, right?
Actually, we have a static web app service based on Azure storage. I mean, if you can host a static website, and this is kind of built on top of it, so you can just go with Azure storage and build your site on top of it. It's that you have to do a lot of work to provide what it's providing right out of the box.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, thank you very much. And once again, thank you for joining, and hope to see everyone next week for another session of Azure Power Lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.